Hello again, and welcome to Retirement Coffee Talk with Charisse Rivers at Zinnia Wealth. My name is Randy Cook. I'm here each week with Charisse as we talk through some of the things that you might be wondering about and maybe worried about when it comes to your future, when it comes to this thing called retirement. One of these days, you're going to walk away from that 9 to 5, and you're moving into this thing called retirement. That's supposed to pay you all that work you've done all these years. But how does that work? Wow. Okay, we need a little help with that, and that is why Charisse is here. All right, Charisse, this is something actually that as we go back and forth and think about, things we talk about on the show that you found, 4 things to think about when you retire. And as I looked through the list, it wasn't all about money. I think this is kind of interesting. Talk to me about this list.
Yeah, a lot of people say, okay, I'm going to retire, but they don't plan to retire as well as we would hope they would. Because there's some things you have to figure out before we worry about your investment plan. The biggest question, why my money, what is it going to do for me? How long is it going to last? I'm approaching retirement. And how do we make this all work? But there's 4 things you have to think about before you retire. And if you're in retirement, you can still do this, especially if you think things are going to change. But the number one question you need to be thinking about and asking yourself is, location. Are you going to stay living in the city that you live in, or are you going to move? So if you live up north, Ohio, New York, are you going to stay there? Are you going to continue to deal with this, the higher taxes up north? And sometimes people move based on taxes, if they're state taxes, and they'll move to a different location because of the tax world that they live in, right? And one of the most popular places to move to in Florida is called the Retirement Disney World, AKA the Villages. And we have little mini villages around Ocala and different areas, and a couple little ones in Gainesville. But the Villages is the hub spot of retirement. It is the cruise ship of all cruise ships. It is the Disneyland and Disney World all combined in one, and so much more. So the question is, wherever it is it might be, location, location, location. Do you want to drive, or you just want to drive a golf cart? Do you want to live in an area where there's a big square and there's like a Publix next door and like everything's accessible? So you have to start thinking about those things, and then the cost to live in those places, right? So that's a big thing when it comes to where do I want to live. It's all about property taxes. It's all about the state taxes. It's all about convenience and cost of living, right? Ocala and the Village is still a great place to retire because of cost of living. Gainesville too, but property taxes are a little high for me over there. But everybody has their own reasons where they want to move. Maybe family. Maybe you move because you want to get closer to family. It might have nothing to do with money and the cost of all that. And figure it out, because you want to know sooner than later as you're planning, so you know what kind of freed up income you have and if you've saved enough to be able to do those things, because maybe you want to move to one of those Jimmy Buffett resorts and it costs you an arm and a leg to live there. Do you have enough money to do that? Does that make sense?
Well, that's a great point, because you could live in your house in Ohio for, all your life, and you paid, $100,000 for that house, and now it's worth $400,000 or $500,000. And then you say, okay, I'm going to get a nice profit here, but now I got to buy something else. And then you see the prices and the interest rates that go along with that. It's a hard decision right now.
It is. And, you can rent an apartment, you can rent a condo, you can buy a condo, you can buy into a quadruplex, you can buy a house. Hey, you can buy a houseboat. I have a client that did that. 2 of them, actually. Okay. There's so many things you can do, but there's costs involved, and there's ongoing costs. So when we create your plan, it's okay. Let's say it's all about downsizing. What are still the trued up costs of that place? Do we have to worry about the roofs? Do we have to worry about this? Do we have that income for that in the future? So we want to make sure we round that all the way in a full circle. And then I have my snowbirds, and they're up north, Ohio, New York, you name it. And then they're down south in Ocala, Gainesville, and the Villages. And eventually those costs to keep up 2 houses get very expensive. New roof, pipes are busting up north. I'm tired of making that drive. Oh, the airline's costing me a lot of money. So eventually the snowbirds do say, I'm going to pick one place. And usually the place 99% of the time is Florida out of the two spots.
All right, let's move on to the next one here. Healthcare.
Healthcare. Okay. Yeah. How will you be covered? And so I don't know if people know this, but different zip codes cost you different in your healthcare, believe it or not. So let's say you're getting ready to turn 65. We'll just hit the Medicare age because that's where everybody's going to eventually go anyways. You know, do you keep your employer plan? Does it really make sense to keep the employer plan? I say 90% of the time it does, but sometimes employer plans really start upping their prices. And if you're paying $800 a month for an employer plan, no, it no longer makes sense. Unless you have like $20,000 in prescription drugs that they're covering, right? That's a different story. So also location is also part of the healthcare planning. So if you get a Medicare supplement in Gainesville versus a Medicare supplement in Ocala versus a Medicare supplement in the Villages, do you know the different zip codes? There's a different price point on each zip code. And you start in Gainesville, it's way more expensive than Ocala and the Villages, right? And so I've had a lot of Gainesville people. It's like, I'm moving to the Villages in Ocala and getting in one of these retirement communities because I don't have to pay as much in property taxes. And my Medicare insurance has gone down. And there's more Medicare doctors over there, et cetera. So I hear that all the time. The city of Gainesville is not going to like me talking about this, but it is what it is, right? And if we're trying to retire and save money, something to think about. Even though I love my UF in Gainesville area. Go Gators alumni. Okay, I'm going to keep moving forward. But on top of that, even if you're out of the state, even out of state costs are even higher. So Florida is very, very protective of their retirees, and they're very good at keeping that healthcare costs down. So let me tell you something else that is incredible to me. Now, I've been doing Medicare for 20 years. And the one thing I've seen that has changed in the Villages is pretty cool. So I'm not a huge fan of HMOs and PPOs, but I know the value. I understand why we get them. I used to offer them. I don't anymore. If you need them, I will refer you out to one of our insurance agents that do those. It happens to be in the Villages. The Villages is like its own city. They got their own law. We know who controls that over there. Would love to meet him one day. But I will tell you this. The doctors have come full circle. And the HMO and PPO in the Villages, hands down, is top notch. You have basically, if you go to doctor's offices in the Villages and you don't have an HMO, they don't want to see you. Okay. I know, it's crazy. So it's a nice tight circle. They've all agreed. Let's just do the HMO. Let's do the HMO right. Let's do it the best way we can for these retirees. And I will say, if I go back 20 years ago, that wasn't the case. I will say, if I go back 8 years ago is when it started to change. And over the last 5 years, it's been a neat thing to really watch happen, because clients who are on Medicare supplements, I always believed in Medicare supplements. In some areas I still do. It's because you're the freedom of choice. You don't have to pay a premium when you go with an Advantage plan. But you don't have freedom of choice. You got to follow a network of doctors. Well, the Villages just upped the ante, and their network of doctors is unbelievable. I think it's every doctor. I'm not going to quote that exactly, but that is the one city I say, hey, the HMO is great over there. Right. And Ocala, I question it, honestly. I'll be honest with you. I'd rather you go with the Medicare supplement, but it's totally up to you. And so when you're choosing where you're going to retire, you also got to consider the healthcare costs. Are you in that zip code is going to cost you so much more? So do you know some of those rules? Okay. Now, number 3, will you work in retirement or not work? And how active do you plan to be? So without answering question number 1, location, and then figuring out the question number 2, your healthcare, now are you going to work? You want to find a retirement community where they like hiring retirees? Are you looking to golf your entire retirement career? And you know it's expensive because you want to play in other golf courses maybe you're not part of. And do you work at those golf courses part-time to get a discount? So you have no idea. That conversation comes up in my office all the time because that's what people do. And I think it's wonderful. And so if you're going to work, maybe you find a retirement community that it's easier to get a part-time job. And or you might just leave a job because you're so sick and tired of it and you think you can do it better than your boss is doing. And you might say, I'm going to go independent. Where can I go independent and make the most amount of money? So those are things you need to consider because there's different demographics all across the country that you could do a great job in based on what you've been doing for the last 30 years if you're not ready to retire. So, but I do want to go to how active you're going to be. We get people all the time that say, okay, I'm going to retire, Charisse. I'm going to start going to the gym and I'm going to go on a cruise. I'm going to go to Europe. I'm going to do all this. And that's a lot. So I got to plan that retirement vacation bucket for those people. But then I get people, it's like, Charisse, I'm going to retire and I'm going to pick the weeds in my garden. I'm going to grow a garden and I'm just going to hang loose at home because I'm a homebody. And then that means the activity isn't as much. So when you're picking location, that's important because if that's all you're going to do, you might not want to move to villages with all those amenities and all those extra things if you want your privacy, right? Maybe you move to Ocala. So you have to consider those things. Or even Gainesville is a great place, but again, we have costs we have to worry about over there. So we have people who say, Charisse, I'm going to move to the villages that live in Ocala or even out of the state. We work with people all across the country. Tell me more about the villages, Charisse. And they say, is it really what it's, talked up to be? And I said, it is. You can golf, you can tennis, you can ride bikes. You have different squares to visit. There's music every night, 7 days a week. There are restaurants. It is booming. You can live close or far and you can be all part of it. And so what a lot of people move to the villages, Randy, just so you know, and they're like, I don't need to go on cruises. I don't need to go to Europe. I've done that here and there when I've worked. There's so much to do in the villages. I'm just going to spend all my time in the villages just playing. And you can. It's pretty incredible. And you can save money that way, right? So sure. That's something else to consider. So when we're talking about location, it starts with location, then healthcare, and then how active are we going to be? And so I've seen every different type of client, every different type of way. I have a solution for you, and at least I know where you can park yourself if you're getting ready to retire, depending if it's about saving money or how active you want to be. So that's all fine, right? So we're talking about golfing and enjoying, and maybe you're going to just want an RV and buy an RV, and maybe you don't need all the big amenities. So that's something to consider. I have a lot of RVers. But number four is about money.
Finally.
How will I generate a lifetime of income, right? So it's the money part. That's the last part. So that's the same thing that we try to convey in our office. I can't create an income plan, an investment plan without knowing these other semantics, right? It's like a 1, 2, 3, and then 4, and then 5. There's different levels in our office as we're going to communicate with you because we got to know this stuff. And there's no investment plan without that written plan. So I got to get all this other information. Then I can do the written plan, and then I can tell you your investment plan, right? So there's a lot to go into it. And the biggest thing we talked about earlier was income checks. I'm going to lose my check from work. How do I continue to get those checks, Charisse? Because I don't want to lose a whole lot of money, but I want to make sure my income is insured. I want insurance on my income, right? Basically. So we have Social Security, that's insurance, right? That should be here forever and ever, and maybe not ever. There's a lot of noise out there about that. Well, come to one of my classes. We'll really dig in about that. Maybe you have a pension. So maybe you have Social Security and a pension. That's great. That means you have 2 guaranteed checks coming in every month for the rest of your life and the rest of your spouse's life, which is great. And that very well could pay for the gas at the pump and the grocery store and keep up with inflation. And it might even help pay for some of your travel. But I know a lot of you who have Social Security and pensions also have some money saved up. And maybe that money saved up is for a legacy and to spend on vacation every year. So you might be set up pretty well. But we want you to be an income wizard. And I know a lot of people don't like, what's an income wizard, Charisse? Well, we're going to teach you all the ways you can get different income checks, guaranteed income checks. So you can get your Social Security. Some of you are going to get a pension. If you don't get a pension, we're going to show you a way by rolling monies from your IRAs to more of a pension income producing type of strategy, right? So that'll basically meet all your fixed needs. Then we're going to talk about, hey, do we want dividend payouts? Because when you're trying to keep up with inflation, a dividend portfolio is fantastic. That's one of the better ways to keep up with inflation, right? And then there could be income annuities, there could be fixed annuities, there could be indexed annuities, and we will never offer a variable annuity. Okay, it's one of the annuities we don't like. But then there's structured notes out there. There's fixed income instruments. There's real estate. I'm going to give you direction on real estate. Do we buy real estate or we don't? Or here's some other ways to buy real estate, because sometimes there's a time to be in a real estate and sometimes not. And is there going to be part-time work? So we want to, take that inventory, see what your liabilities are, see what you've saved, see where you want to move, what your healthcare is going to cost. Are you going to work? How active are you going to be? I mean, this is a full-blown plan from soup to nuts. And you got to know some of these things first before you come into us. And if you don't, we will educate you and we'll start priming you. So you start having those conversations before you come on the second appointment. But retirement, it's all about income. How do we make sure we don't run out of income, right? It's not always about accumulation. And it starts with some very basic factors. So let's get those basic things set and true, right? And get those things working for us. And then we can figure out the investment plan.
There is so much to think about as you move toward retirement and you're in retirement. And I think if you listen to this whole segment here, and I think I'm going to make this our podcast this week, and that is this: how much local knowledge Charisse has of just the people around us right here who are retiring and the issues that you deal with and they deal with. This is not 1-800-retirement. This is Charisse, who's put down roots here in Ocala and Gainesville and the villages and Tampa and offices and all these places, helping people retire exclusively here in Florida, and knowing what it takes to retire in Florida and all the ins and outs of Medicare here in Florida. Give her a call and let's have that conversation. 833-368-3680. 833-368-3680, or online, you go to zinniawealth.com, ZINNIA wealth.com. Hit that box that says complimentary retirement consultation, and you'll be on your way.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Coffee Talk podcast. If you have questions or would like to begin the process of building a tailored retirement plan, call Zinnia Wealth at 803-368-3680 or find us online at zinniawealth.com.
Charisse Rivers is an investment advisor representative of Zinnia Wealth Advisory, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Exposure to ideas and financial vehicles discussed should not be considered investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell any financial vehicle. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Investments can fluctuate and when redeemed may be worth more or less than when originally invested. Financial professionals are not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if Charisse Rivers is licensed in your state, please contact their office. Zinnia Wealth Advisory, LLC is not affiliated with nor endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any other government agency and does not provide legal or tax advice. Annuity guarantees rely solely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company. Any client experiences discussed during this show are unique to that client. They are not meant to imply or suggest you will experience the same results. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance and annuity products offered through Charisse Rivers, NPN Insurance License Number 8718011.